You keep telling yourself you've moved on, that you're done, that what happened is in the past. But if that were true, why does your mind still return to them in quiet moments? Why does your heart still leap at every notification, secretly hoping it's them? The truth is hard to admit, not to anyone else, but to yourself. You don't miss the person, you miss who you thought they were. You miss the version of them you created in your mind. The ideal, the fantasy, the emotional refuge you projected onto their presence. Carl Jung taught that we often fall in love not with the person but with a part of ourselves we've lost or rejected. What you're holding on to isn't love, it's a mirror of unmet needs, hidden desires, and emotional wounds longing to be healed. That person became a screen for your projections. They represented safety, validation, passion, or wholeness. And when they left or disappointed you, it wasn't just about the breakup. It was a collapse of the internal world you built around them. This is why moving on feels impossible. You're not grieving their absence. You're grieving the story you told yourself, the future you imagined, the emotional meaning you assigned to every interaction. And deep down, the pain you feel isn't just heartbreak. It's a confrontation with your own unconscious. That longing you carry is a call to return to yourself, to reclaim the love, validation, and sense of worth you thought only they could give you. You don't need them. You never did. What you needed was what they symbolized, and that's something you can find within. But first you must dismantle the illusion. See them not as the ideal, but as they truly are. Accept that the love you gave was real, but the image you clung to was not. When you release the projection, you begin to see clearly. And from that clarity comes freedom, the freedom to love without illusion and to finally return to yourself. Have you ever wondered why certain people seem to leave an imprint on your soul? Why their absence feels deeper than it should? Or why your heart still aches even after knowing they hurt you? Carl Jung believed that relationships are never just about the other person. They are mirrors, reflecting the hidden, often forgotten parts of ourselves. Every emotional bond is an unconscious stage where the psyche projects its unmet needs, unresolved wounds, and repressed desires onto someone else. When you fall in love, it's rarely just about who they are. It's about what they awaken in you. They stir something deep, something familiar but unrecognized. You might believe you finally found someone who sees you, who completes you. But in truth, you're often seeing a reflection of your own unconscious, not the person as they truly are. They may embody your longing for acceptance, the safety you never had, or the power you were taught to suppress. And this is why it hurts so much when they leave or betray you. It feels like losing a part of yourself. This dynamic is not always beautiful. In fact, it's often the root of emotional chaos. Because what you're interacting with is not just their personality, but your own psychic material projected outward. Their silence mirrors your fear of abandonment. Their control reflects the parts of you that feel helpless. Their love touches your deepest ache to be seen. Until you recognize this, you will continue repeating patterns, loving the same person in different forms, confusing trauma, bonding with fate, and calling emotional reenactment destiny. But once you begin to see relationships through the lens of your own unconscious, you reclaim your power. You stop blaming them and start understanding yourself. This isn't about assigning fault, it's about becoming aware. The people who hurt us often carry the blueprint of the very things we've denied within. When you realize this, every relationship becomes an opportunity not just for connection but for profound self-discovery. Emotional dependence doesn't begin in a relationship. It begins in childhood, when you first learned that being loved came with conditions. That to be accepted, you had to be quiet, pleasing, helpful, or good. So little by little, you started to hide your real self. You silenced your needs, concealed your anger, buried your fears. In place of your authentic being, you built what Carl Jung called the persona, a carefully shaped mask designed to meet the expectations of others. At first, this false self helps you survive. It wins approval, it keeps you safe. But over time, it becomes a prison, because the more you identify with this persona, the further you drift from your true self. You forget what you like, what you feel, what you need, because your worth has become tied to someone else's reaction. And this is the root of emotional dependence, the belief that your value exists only in another's eyes. In relationships, this false self shows up as overgiving, over-apologizing, over-adapting. You shapeshift to avoid abandonment. You stay silent to keep the peace. You accept less than you deserve because you fear being alone more than being unfulfilled. And even when you're praised, it never quite lands because deep down, you know they're not loving the real you. They're loving the mask. This is why no amount of external validation ever feels like enough. You may hear compliments, feel desired, even be told you're loved. But if the one being loved isn't the real you, it creates a deep and growing emptiness. It's like drinking from a cup with a hole at the bottom. The love slips through because it was never meant for the self that's been hidden away. Healing begins the moment you stop performing. When you no longer seek approval, but instead seek alignment with your truth. Because the only real freedom is found when you're loved not despite who you are, but because of it. And that love, first and foremost, must come from you. You call it anxiety, the racing heart, the sleepless nights, the pit in your stomach every time they pull away. But what if it's not just a symptom? What if it's a message? Carl Jung believed that anxiety is not the enemy. It is the soul's alarm, a signal that something deep within you is out of alignment. It rises not merely from fear of losing the other, but from the unbearable tension between who you truly are and who you've forced yourself to become to keep love. Every time you silence your truth to avoid rejection, every time you betray your needs to be good enough, you widen the gap between your authentic self and the version you show the world. That gap is where anxiety lives. It's the ache of your soul crying out, not for more love from them, but for more honesty from you. It's your essence knocking on the door, begging to be seen again, to be lived again. You think anxiety is your flaw, your weakness, but it's actually a sign of your sensitivity to truth. It's your psyche fighting to restore balance. It says, this life you're living isn't yours. This love you're clinging to is hurting you. It's not just about losing someone. It's about the fear of looking inward and realizing you've lost yourself in the process. This is why no message, no touch, no fleeting reassurance from them ever truly eases the panic. Because the pain isn't on the outside. It's the internal conflict of a self-abandon. The one who says, I'm fine when you're breaking. The one who stays quiet while your heart screams. And the longer you ignore that scream, the louder it becomes. But here's the truth. Your anxiety is sacred. It's not here to torment you. It's here to awaken you. To remind you that the price you're paying for emotional survival is your own wholeness, and healing doesn't begin when the other person comes back. It begins when you finally decide to come back to yourself. You think you're choosing your relationships consciously, that you fall for someone because of compatibility, chemistry, or shared values. But what if the real force behind your choices lies not in awareness, but in what Carl Jung called the shadow? The hidden part of your psyche filled with everything you deny, suppress, or are ashamed to acknowledge. The shadow is not evil. It's simply unconscious. It holds your unmet needs, your repressed emotions, your unlived desires. And because you can't see it clearly, it projects itself onto others, especially in intimate relationships. That's why you keep ending up with the same type of person in different forms. Emotionally unavailable, manipulative, critical. It's not bad luck, it's your shadow trying to show you what still needs healing. You are drawn to people who embody what you've disowned in yourself. If you suppress anger, you might be attracted to those who are controlling. If you deny your need for validation, you may cling to someone who withholds it. And so the cycle continues. You fall, you get hurt, you blame them, without realizing that a part of you chose that pain to reflect the work you've avoided within. Until you integrate the shadow, it will keep writing the script of your relationships. It will disguise trauma bonding as love and emotional chaos as passion. You will mistake the familiar for the meaningful, and you will sabotage your own peace to recreate the drama your unconscious has not yet resolved. But here's the key. What you bring into awareness, you begin to transform. The moment you recognize your shadow, it loses its control. You no longer need to seek pain to understand yourself. You can break the cycle not by avoiding relationships, but by seeing them clearly, by asking, what in this dynamic is mirroring a part of me I haven't yet faced? Freedom comes when you stop being a puppet of your wounds and become the conscious author of your emotional life. Until then, it won't be you who chooses love. It will be your shadow. There comes a moment when the pain of pretending becomes heavier than the pain of truth. When the mask you've worn for years begins to crack, not because it no longer fits, but because your soul refuses to be silenced any longer. This is the beginning of what Carl Jung called individuation, the psychological process of becoming whole, of reclaiming every part of who you truly are. Individuation is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's peeling away the persona, the polite, pleasing version of yourself you built to gain love and avoid rejection. It's facing the shadow, the anger, fear, desire, and pain you buried in the name of survival. And it's choosing piece by piece to live from your center instead of from fear. This journey isn't linear. It's raw, uncomfortable, and deeply personal. You will confront the ways you abandoned yourself to be chosen. You will see how often you bent your truth to keep others close. And most painfully, you will realize that much of your suffering came not just from others, but from your silence, your denial, your longing to be loved at the cost of your authenticity. But this awareness is not punishment. It's liberation. Because every time you say no to what diminishes you, every time you choose your peace over their approval, you are taking a step back toward yourself. You are gathering the lost pieces of your soul, the parts exiled to be accepted, and bringing them home. Individuation is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming integrated. It's the radical act of choosing to be whole, even when that means walking away from what is familiar but false. And in that choice, you discover a love deeper than any you've begged for. The love that comes from finally standing by your own side. This is not the end of your story, it's the beginning. The moment you stop waiting to be saved and start becoming your own sanctuary. Letting go is often misunderstood. People think it means forgetting, erasing, pretending it never mattered. But true letting go is far more sacred. It is not an act of erasure, but of rebirth. When you finally release what was never meant to stay, you are not losing, you are returning. Returning to yourself, to the version of you that existed before you bent, broke, and shrank to fit into someone else's world. Carl Jung taught that the pain we feel when we let go is not just about separation from the other. It's the mourning of our own illusions. You're not just grieving a person. You're grieving the fantasy you built around them, the future you imagined, the version of yourself you tried to become to make it work. And that grief is necessary, because in that pain lies truth. The truth that holding on to someone who cannot meet you is a form of self-abandonment. The truth that loyalty to a false connection is disloyalty to your soul. And the truth that the longer you cling, the longer you delay your own healing. Letting go feels like death because in many ways it is the death of the false self that was created for someone else's approval. But from that death comes a birth. This is not about bitterness, it's about liberation, about choosing peace over patterns, about releasing the emotional anchor that's been dragging you beneath the surface. So you can finally breathe again. It is in the quiet aftermath of loss that clarity arises, that you begin to see what love is and what it is not. Letting go is not weakness, it is the most courageous form of love, love for yourself. It says, I matter too. It says, my soul is no longer available for spaces that crush it. And in that sacred act, you are not just walking away from someone, you are walking back into your own life, no longer fragmented, no longer begging, but whole, awake, and free. For so long you've waited for someone to see you, to choose you, to finally give you the love you never received. You've stayed in places that drained you, hoping they would one day wake up and realize your worth. But here's the truth, one that is as liberating as it is painful. You don't need to be saved. You need to choose yourself. Carl Jung reminded us that the real journey isn't about changing the other. It's about reclaiming what you gave away in exchange for conditional love. You keep thinking that if they changed, if they apologized, if they stayed, if they finally loved you the right way, then you would feel whole again. But that longing points not to their absence, but to your own, to the places within you that have gone silent while waiting to be chosen. Every time you make yourself smaller to fit into someone's expectations, every time you silence your truth just to keep a connection alive, you are abandoning yourself. And the tragedy is not that they didn't love you enough. It's that you kept hoping they would, while forgetting you had the power to love yourself first. Choosing yourself is not about ego. It's about integrity. It's standing in front of your pain and saying, I will no longer betray who I am just to be loved by someone who doesn't see me. It's no longer waiting for someone to arrive and give you permission to be whole. That permission was always yours to give. When you choose yourself, you break the cycle. You stop begging for crumbs and start feeding your soul. You stop reaching for people who cannot meet you and start rising to meet yourself. And from that place, rooted, awake, worthy, you begin to attract not what your wounds crave, but what your wholeness deserves. You are not broken. You are just buried beneath layers of conditioning and pain. And now, it's time to rise. Not because someone pulled you up, but because you decided to no longer leave yourself behind. At a certain stage in life, we no longer seek noise, approval, or external validation. What remains is a quiet, lingering question. Have I truly been honest with myself? One of the most important lessons drawn from this reflection is that emotional pain in relationships doesn't always come from others. It often stems from abandoning ourselves, from wearing masks, from living to please, from silencing the very parts of us that long to be seen. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the journey back to the true self, is not just for the young. It is a lifelong path. And in later years, we are gifted a sacred opportunity to look back with clarity, to let go of the emotional weight we've carried for decades, and to return home to ourselves. There is no need to rewrite the past. What matters now is having the courage to start choosing yourself gently and steadily. Perhaps the deepest truth is this: healing doesn't come when others finally change. It begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself. And when you do, peace is no longer something you chase. It becomes the quiet companion that walks with you into the most authentic years of your life.